The original Fangio, not the nephew we're seeing racing here today, win the race. People like Sterling Moss, he won it back in 1954 in an Oscar, but here is the grid. Take us through it.
Well, the two Bram brothers and Derek Daly in the lead. Nissan qualified on pole by some margin from Wallich, Schneider and Segala in the green, white and red Porsche that we see there, the Torno car. Row 2, Robinson, Earl and Bailey in the Nissan, the second Nissan. And there you are, Juan Fangio the second, and Willie T. Ribbs, the sometime IndyCar driver, in the leading Toyota. They'll be very fast, but they'll be fragile.
Yeah, of course, Fangio won 4 races last season.
That's right. So it's Atchison, Nielsen, Jones and Bazell. Kenny Atchison, a former Nissan driver, he's rode into the single entry for Jaguar after one car got destroyed in qualifying again. John Winter, Henri Pescarolo and Frank Jelinski, more veteran driving strength in the Yost team, the number 7 Blaupunkt car, which won the 24 Hours of Daytona. Then Bonner, Sharp and Klein, and Moran and Wallace. Moran and Wallace, of course, Andy Wallace, former Le Mans winner with Jaguar as well, and he's in the second of the Toyotas. Another Porsche, Giampiero Moretti, he owns this car in Momo colours. Stanley Dickens, a veteran as well as Moretti, and they're joined by Mundas in the 30 car, McAdam, Perner and Phillips. They're in a Chevy Spice on row 5. Row 6, Hotchkiss, Adams and Cord forsaking their number 10 wins Porsche for another Spice, and John Paul Jr. and Jimmy Weaver teamed up in the number 24 Rob Dyson Porsche.
Yes, row 7, Delano, Carter, Petri, and now we're seeing the GTUs and GTO competitors. In fact, the 4 races within the race here, the big race, of course, is for the GTP cars, but then there's the GT Lights, which Martin has already mentioned, the Camel Lights, and then the GTO and GTU cars. They're all space frame cars. In the GTO section, we're seeing some of the competitors there. Mainly the factory Mustangs against the factory Mazdas, against the factory Nissans, and then in the GTU category, that's factory Nissans versus factory Mazdas. So those different races going on, the GTOs and GTUs, all space frame chassis cars, what we'd call the silhouette formula. A lot slower, of course, around this 5-mile Sebring circuit than the GTP cars.
Looking at the track here, Andrew, you can see already that the track is damp. Early morning rain has fallen, and so the driver's already starting on intermediate settings with 100% humidity, almost guaranteed rain, and it looks like they're going to have a pretty tough time of it. 21 in the pits.
Yeah, that's the Hurley Hayward-led car, which Wayne Taylor is also driving. Wayne Taylor not running that new car here. And René Herzog from Switzerland and Müller also driving that. Obviously an early problem. And you see there's been damp, Martin, rain off the line, and this circuit changed again this season. In fact, it was changed about 6 years ago. Does not use so many of the old runways of the original Sebring Airbrace anymore. The in-car camera playing up a little bit.
Yeah, looks like they're having problems with that one, but the Deutsche Schroeder John Fergus Mustang is obviously going to supply us with pictures. The 21 Porsche that we just saw in the pits, they had an engine blow up in the first laps of Thursday's practice, so they took the car away from the circuit back to their shop in Miami to fix that. Obviously, the car not having turned a wheel before this meeting, they're still having those teething problems, and they may well be a late starter, if a starter at all.
Disappointed to see Hurley Hayward, who is the better known of that group of drivers who, of course, had so much success in this form of racing in the old days with Peter Gregg in the days of Porsche 935s. Well, that car is up and running now, and it looks as if it will have to start from the pit lane.
Well, they've got a real charger in the form of Wayne Taylor, the South African who started his sports racing career in England for Spice and has now become a big name over in the States. He is very, very fast indeed. He could well do great things with that car if it gives him the chance.
Yeah, just a little guy, did great things in Spices, of course. Well, there you can see a typical bit of the old Sebring, the old runway section. And Phil Hill, who won the race many years ago, is here to watch the race as a guest of Dan Gurney, who of course runs the Toyota Eagles. The first time that the former world champion Phil Hill has been to Sebring since 1972.
He was at Le Mans last year for the first time since he raced there as well in the late 60s, and admitting to being quite surprised at the changes made around the circuit, but he'd be of course very surprised to see it this season with the brand new pits. It looks like we're rolling up for a start. The green flag is out, and the hammers are down immediately. The Nissans jostling away there with the Porsche for the lead, and it looks like the Porsche's got it into turn one.
Yes, we haven't been given the number one starting drivers. We'll try and pick up the crash helmets for you. Nissan, of course, have won this race for the past 2 years. They actually qualified 3 cars in the top 5, but decided to park one of them. That's a regular Nissan policy. These Nissans prepared in California.
The Jaguars made a flying start there, Andrew, right up into 3rd position already, dropped the 2 Nissans, but look at the speed of the lead Porsche. You'd have to guess that that's Bob Wallach starting, judging by the way he's got away. He was very upset at Daytona by people suggesting that he was too old to be driving, despite the fact he's only in his mid-40s, and decided to go out and win the race. Well, he's already going to start stamping his mark on this field as well.
Yes, the Yoss team pretty upset with the latest regulations in the World Sports Car Championship, tending to concentrate on IMSA this season, and just straining to see the crash helmet, and I really say I wasn't sure that it was Bob's helmet. Bert Schneider, another quick man, of course, in a car of this nature, but this Porsche 962 design, derived from the 956, really has got longevity, hasn't it?
Certainly has. It looked to be over the hill in IMSA terms a couple of years ago. In fact, only managed 1 win last season. That was in the wet in the hands of James Weaver. And surprising to see so many of them going so strongly still in this category. That looks like the GTO winning car from Daytona. The Mustangs finished 1st and 2nd in their class, and they're already out to dominate it again. The huge V8 stock block engines, of course, and space frame chassis with just the bodywork looking roughly like a production car, but only roughly. In-car camera shots, again, showing you the wide expanses of the main straights here at Sebring. It's a full sort of airport width straight, much different to the kind of racing circuit they're used to using. And obviously plenty of opportunity for pulling alongside a driver, so good passing places along the main straight.
Yes, and Dorsey Schroeder, very competitive racer, 37 years old, from Baldwin, Missouri, I think it is, married to Kay, and has 2 children. And last year won the IMSA GTO Championship, of course. So
just a quick look at the Camel Lights class that went through just ahead of this field. It looked like Parker Johnston had already passed Martino Finotto's Ferrari Spice. Johnston, of course, being so dominant in that class, which is basically the 2nd string class of this racing series. In the first 2 rounds, has just walked away with it. The Ferrari took pole position, or the Ferrari Spice took pole position, a glorious sounding V8 Ferrari racing engine. But already it looks like the Acura Honda engine Spice of Parker Johnston has taken the lead.
Yes, Honda America have taken to calling their cars Acuras, all the cars in fact, not just that seems to be the generic name for Hondas in the States. I'm not quite sure of the reason for that. There must be some marketing ploy, but I've no doubt will be explained to us at some stage in the game. But that is a new car, as you say, and very competitive, as we see the caption telling us all about the GTO cars. And there you see the leading one in your picture, the Dorsey Schroeder John Fergus car.
So we'll have to guess what's happening at the lead of this race, although it did look like the Porsche certainly got away quite cleanly. And the Yoss Racing team, well experienced in long-distance racing, both in Europe and in the States, of course. In Europe, often out-juggled the Works Porsche teams, when Works Porsche teams did exist, to do such things like win Le Mans against them and numerous other sports car races. So Reinhold Joost and his men, very experienced, not only in the driving strength, but also that was a very close one there. Somebody already parked out on the back of the circuit, judging by the back of the car. It looks like he just bounced off the wall and slid right back there onto the apex of that corner on the racing line. No sign of flags there either, looking through the windscreen, so that's a bit of a surprise. Back at the lead of the race then. It looks like Bernd Schneider's helmet inside the cockpit. The young German has been a Formula 3 champion in his own country. Drove Formula 1 for Zakspeed, which was the German Formula 1 team, a couple of years back, and is very much a hot foot in this car. And you can see that it looks like he's out on the first lap of practice. There is nothing else in sight. He's already stamping his mark very effectively on this race. Fuel may be a part of the problem later on, but assuming that it's going to rain, the teams will run as hard as they can now, if necessary going over their fuel scheduling, and then wait for the rain to slow the track down, slow the cars down, and allow them to come back onto their sort of reserves. But at the moment it certainly looks as though there is nothing in this field that is going to touch young Schneider, and he will have a very boring race if it continues in this sort of frame.
Yes, of course, pit stops will come up, Bernd Schneider. A lot of people thought he'd be in Grand Prix racing again this season with the Eddie Jordan 7-Up team. Somehow they couldn't get it all together, and so he has decided to go with Jost. Here's some previous winners. The 86 race, Joe Gartner, Bob Aitken, Hans Stuck, Porsches. This is in a period when Porsches are absolutely dominating. 87, Bobby Rahal and Jochen Mass. In 88, Klaus Ludwig and Hans Stuck. And then the two recent victories from the Nissans of Brabham, Luyendijk, Robinson, and last year Daly and Earl, with Brabham actually finishing in second place and snatching that place right in the closing stage of the race, in fact.
We did just catch a glimpse in the last corner of the dice going on for second position. It still looks as though the Jag's in third position, having a lot of trouble trying to find out what's in second at the moment, though. Never getting a clear shot of them. There they come, right in the back of the field. Certainly the Jag was third. So we've got to assume that it was the Spice in second position. But at the moment, there is nothing else for it but to watch Bernd Schneider showing just how a sports car should be driven. Thought for a moment we were looking at a pace car, but in fact it was just one of the slower GTU cars out in front of him, very unsponsored at the back. Looked like a road car.
Yes, tremendous pace set by Bernd Schneider. It looks as if the rain is starting to come down now, yes. Well, Schneider leads from the second Jost Porsche, David Jones third. Let's go now to our American commentators, David Hobbs and, of course, Dave Despain.
We're back at Sebring, Florida, where the Porsches lead in the early minutes of the 12-hour grind. Nissan presents the 12 hours of Sebring. Jaguar running third. Here's your second half of the top 10 with the Toyota Fangio in sixth spot. Bonner, Moretti, and the rest of the top 10. And here is your leader, Bernd Schneider, who's just scorching his way around the racetrack. Moments before, or moments after we went to that commercial, there was a change in that GTO leadership as the Mazda moved around the Mustang, and that's a battle that we expect will continue through throughout the 12 hours. Using every bit of the road. Here's the in-car look from the Lights Division car of David Tennyson, Toronto, Ontario, Canada driver, taking it down the straightaway and closing on the opposition.
Coming into turn one, looks like one of the Mustangs right in front of him.
Here you see the opportunity that you have at Sebring to pick your line. There's so much concrete there, and they try to use it all, don't they?
Well, that's the sort of thing we used to do in the old days at that turn, when where the two runways intersected. You could go right round the outside and make the corner. In fact, an incredibly fast corner. And that's Hurley Haywood, of course, who learnt that trick from me back in 1978. Here we see him about to take one of the Camel Lights. Remember, Hurley Haywood, of course, started right at the back, so he is having to make a run through the field.
I think we have more information on that story. Let's find out what the problem was on Hurley Haywood's number 21 car. Gary Lee has the story.
Well, Dave, Hurley was very anxious to start this race. It would be a record 19th start for Hurley, but with all the technology in GTP cars, the simple problem of a dead battery prevented him from being out there on the starting grid when everybody else pulled away.
Civilians can all relate to that. The best laid plans, as they say. Haywood does get the start. He's won a couple of times here, has made now his 19th start. No other driver in history has started as many races here at the 12-hour. Here are the Nissans, and they are running in 4th and 5th position, and obviously running in formation, and now a swap in position as the 84 moves around. That will be Robinson passing his teammate Brabham for position on the racetrack. Team orders, team strategy, do you think here, David?
I don't think there's much team orders and team strategy here. The only strategy and the only orders will be do not run into each other. Preferably do not run into anybody, trying to hold the other one at bay. But yes, it's pretty well live and let live. Now, if we come down towards the end of the season and the driver has got some sort of a lock on the championship, they will obviously want to lead. That number 7 car there, that's the second Yost car. That's being driven by Frank Jelinski, who won the Le Mans the Daytona 24-hour this year. Here we see the Lights car again coming under the Goodyear Bridge in front of the pits, right under our booth. There you see the rev counter. What's he revving on? Oh, it's okay. I'll put my glasses on. 9,000 RPM. There we see it from the outside. This is not David Tennyson's normal car. Normally he drives his own Camel Light with a Ferrari engine. This weekend he's teamed up with another bunch of guys, and he's driving a Buick engine Spice. He's with Mike Dow and Ken Knopf.
The lights cars are smaller versions of the prototypes. We talked about the unlimited technology of the GTP division. These are basically miniature GTP cars. They're very, very powerful. They're very, very fast. They have great brakes. They're not quite as fast as the P cars, and they run for their own championship here in IMSA competition. This being the third round of the 1991 Camel GT battle, and here you see the handling and the braking as he powers down into the hairpin.
Well, one thing the Camel light car does do is stop extremely well because it is lighter, and they have an engine limit. It's a 3-litre limit on the engine, and of course the other big thing that they are not allowed to have, which the GT prototypes have, is that you cannot supercharge or turbocharge the engine. They again have a sliding weight scale depending on the engine size and type. 4 valves. There's really a 6-cylinder capacity on Camel light, but as the Ferrari make a production engine with 8 engines, they do in fact let that in, and that's it there, the number 80 car. Following this car, the number 48, which is a V6 4-valve engine, Acura, the Japanese engine in there, of course. That's a very sophisticated engine, and he is being hounded at the moment by the number 80 car, which is just a few yards behind him, which is a Ferrari V8 with 4 valves. That has to carry just a bit more weight than this car, and this 4-valve car has to carry more weight than the Buick that David Tennyson's driving.
The complications of the formula, of course, result in very equal competition, and here we see it on the racetrack. The Japanese Acura, the Italian Ferrari, and that Acura is worth talking about because it swept Daytona and West Palm, won the pole, ran the fastest lap of the race, won the race, and so it has left the Ferrari as a clear-cut underdog here today, a challenger,
Except this is the first time this 80 car has had the 4-valve engine. They've been allowed to put it in, but it has to run 50 pounds heavier than the Acura, and that extra 50 pounds, you carry it around for 12 hours, and you have to make, 6,000 or 7,000 applications of the brakes. It adds up,
It's a good close battle on the racetrack, and for the moment the Acura has the better of it. They now move into traffic. Parker Johnstone, a very happy camper as he has picked up, and splitting the traffic and diving down into this right-hand complex. Johnstone's team has really turned out to be a powerhouse. Here is your GTO battle as we continue to watch Dorsey Schrader, his teammate John Fergus. I believe that's the leader in his sights up there, David.
And I'm very happy to see that because that is an old codger who's even older than I am. That is Brian Redmond driving that car.
Brian Redmond has his own history, not only here at Sebring, but throughout the world of international sports car racing and endurance racing. And Redmond, for the moment, has got his foot in it pretty good as he runs away from Dorsey Schrader. This is the battle in the GTO division. It's all happening live here on ESPN at Sebring, and we'll be back with more of the action right after this. Hendrick Field, Sebring, Florida, a bomber base during World War II. No one ever dreamed of the activities that were to come here in the future of this place. In fact, Alec Ullman, the man who gave birth to this race, discovered it while searching for places for surplus aircraft. Watch the landing here, but watch as that Piper Cub, I believe it is joined out there on the runway by a 175-mile-an-hour race car. Sebring of old. Today, the FAA says no, the planes and the cars can't share the runways anymore. They have built the course purposely and specifically for racing cars, and the airplanes take a back seat as the 1991 39th running of this sports car classic continues to unfold here. And the history of this place is very much in the air. You sort of have a real sense when you walk into this place.
Bureaucrats are always spoil sports, aren't they?
Yes, they just couldn't have that for safety purposes. And indeed, the battle for the use of the facility is a big part of the history of this place. On a couple of occasions, the Sebring race was in danger just simply because of the bureaucracies, not only of aviation, but also of world sports car racing, squabbles over rules and formulas and so forth that put the race in doubt. But it has endured, and today is its 39th birthday. It is the oldest sports car race in America, and you're riding around this classic 3.7-mile, 17-turn racetrack with Dorsey Schrader in his Mustang at speeds of close to 170 miles an hour. Through turn one,
and Dorsey Schrader actually is about to be lapped by our leader, believe it or not. There we see the second place car. Bernd Schneider had must have had some sort of an off, I think, because his teammate John Winter is in front of him now. They're in the Blaupump car, and Schneider is catching up. They're both about to put a lap on those GTO cars. And in fact, both those GTO cars that we see there, both Fords have been passed by both Mazdas, who's just out of the picture. Schneider hurrying his teammate now. Is he going to learn through here? Is he? No, he's not. He's going to take his left front fender off if he's not going to get. Frank Jelinski's a bit underrated. He was a big part of winning the Daytona 24-hour race in February. And he's always been just sort of classed as the slight underdog, but he's got himself a nice drive with Yost Racing this year, and I think we'll be seeing quite a lot of old Frank.
Reinhold Yost and his team are certainly a major force in international sports car competition. They won Le Mans a couple of times, one year when the factory wasn't there, and then the next year when the factory was. Won Daytona twice, 11 years apart, most recently, of course, last month when the IMSA season got underway.
One hates to point to luck, but the only time I drove for Yost at Le Mans, the thing did 2 laps. This bloke here has done about 12. Number 53, what's happened to him? He had an nasty coming together somewhere.
That's the McDill & McDill Chevrolet Camaro that's taken one on the chin and will be going to pit road for repairs. The flapping sheet metal would cause him, I'm sure, to be brought in if he didn't choose to come in on his own, but he has done so, and will be making repairs to, again, one of the O cars. Here's the battle for the lead, and Bert Schneider charges under Jelinski at the corner that another German, Hans Stuck, said took a big heart to drive.
That's
he
right.
Powered through there and had the bigger heart and took the lead.
So there's Bernd Schneider back in the lead. Of course, with a track that's as wet as this offline, it could be that he was overtaking some of the slower traffic, got himself offline onto some wet. He must have had a fairly big moment because he was well behind Frank Jelinski just a few laps back. There we see the Jaguar of Davy Jones now in front of the Nissan, and they're about to put a lap on the GTO leader, which is the Mazda there, number 63.
Traffic, a very big issue here throughout the race with 4 different divisions of competition. We have a speed differential of going for the gold, and he'll go 3 wide and find a spot through there. How do you make those judgments, David? How do you know whether to go ahead and take that chance right there or figure, hey, it's 12 hours, I'll just lay back?
Well, it used to be that in a 12-hour race, one was extremely picky and choosy where you got through these things. You know, if you saw a gap, you didn't always go for it. Today, with all these young lions out there pushing these cars, the cars are so reliable, you can drive them very hard, and you kind of drive like a sprint race. If you see a gap, I mean, you go for it.
As this 12-hour battle continues here, we see the Alex Job Border Cantina Porsche, old 911. Actually, it's a brand new 911. That car was just built for this season. Here is your GTO class leader, the number 63 car, being driven by the team of Bryce Cobb, John Osteen, and Brian Redmond. A lot of talent and a lot of experience represented in that threesome.
There's the 91 car. That's pretty interesting. That's the Corvette owned by the Morrison team out of Georgia, and that is really a stock car. Like you were saying, these cars are framed cars. I mean, they're absolute silhouettes. This is a real ZR1 Corvette. It's been modified from a street car. It has a chassis number and the whole lot.
Came out of the factory as a street car, unlike most of these cars which are purpose-built for racing, and so that makes them a bit of an underdog here. They did very well at Daytona, took that car to 5th place. Let's go down on pit road now to Gary Lee.
Tim McAdam had planned to be standing right here watching his teammate Jeff Perner in the Appleby Chevy Spice in the early going. However, you're standing here, but you're not watching. This has been a tough day so far for the Spice team.
Gary, that's right. We've had the last 2 days a misfire that we cannot locate, and it's getting worse and worse. Therefore, we're going to either just shake the engine to a pulp, or we're going to try to fix it and get back out there and run.
And the team car, which is a Chevy Fab car, had a fuel bracket line break off. They lost about 10 or 15 minutes here in the pit area. It's been a tough day so far for this team.
You never like to have that.
Yes, a tremendous motor race going on here. The 2 Porsches running absolutely wheel-to-wheel, Martin, and then the Jaguar, and then the 2 Nissans, which are running very close together. It seemed to me that the Porsches pulled away from the Jaguar in the last couple of laps, but a lot of this can be explained by the terrible traffic that's out there. This kind of race with some very slow cars as well as some very quick ones, and it does make it pretty difficult. So at the moment, the Yost Porsches very much the big surprise. We didn't expect them to be quite this quick. Of course, it is a game of cat and mouse, a 12-hour race, a long way to go. We aren't yet into the first pit stops, of course. Martin, what's your verdict so far?
Well, as you say, Andrew, you generally expect Porsches in this day and age of that vintage to take things by stealth, having reliably outlasted everything else that's gone quicker. But at the moment, you would think that this was a 10-lap race, and these two guys were not teammates, but fighting each other for the lead. And I must say, I'm very surprised, first of all, that Bernd Schneider dropped back so far to come into the clutches of his teammate in the number 7 Porsche, and also that they're swapping places so fast and furiously in hour 1 with 11 hours still to go. I don't know, it's very surprising.
Well, it makes it good for us, and it makes it good for the spectators, as there you see Schneider sweeping past one of the slower Camel-like cars. The green, white and red Torno number 6 Porsche under the bridge there.
Yeah, the traffic, as you're saying, Andrew, is pretty intense here, and as you can see there, Schneider lapping through the chicane. That was a real sort of Grand Prix chance there he took. But it's absolutely critical, as David Hobbs was saying earlier. These days, the cars do last all the way to the end, and you can't wait a couple of laps before making a move. You have to take the chance as soon as it presents itself. What we're looking at here is somebody marking up dry, slick tyres with yellow chalk marks, which they will then use a routing tool to dig grooves into. This man is marking where the grooves are going to go. They're turning these dry, slick racing tyres into wets, or intermediate wets, for this sort of mixed conditions, on the understanding that if it doesn't absolutely pour down, they'll be able to use them in a sort of drizzly conditions. So everybody's still firmly expecting wet weather. Now the car we're looking at just come around the corner, 48, the white car with the red nose writing. The Spice Acura, that started the West Palm Beach race on wet settings. Again, everybody pretty much convinced that it might rain, and they took the big gamble starting on soft suspension, even though they had slick tyres on, which should theoretically have cost them a lot of time, because it didn't in fact rain, and everybody else with firmer suspension, dry settings, should have done a lot better. But in fact, they managed to romp home and win their class quite comfortably. And as you can see now, the class battle has disappeared as well. The Acura Spice leading comfortably, and the Ferrari engine Spice that it was battling with, the pole position car in the Camel Lights class, already disappeared behind it.
Yes, I'm very impressed with the driver, Parker Johnston, because he has come out of what we call touring car racing with little Hondas. 6th is the Toyota Fangio, 7th the Brian Bonner car, 8th Moretti. Let's go to a short break. Winter is 2nd, Chip Robinson 3rd, Davy Jones 4th in the Jaguar, and Jeff Brabham in 5th place. Chip Robinson now moved ahead of the Jaguar of Davy Jones, who, just to remind you again, had that big shunt in qualifying. That's the lights position. Parker Johnston leading from the Ferrari engine car, Alma Capelli from Italy 3rd. And Bryce Cobb, a man who won Le Mans last year, now in the Mazda GTO, leading from Jeremy Dale. In the Nissan, John Morton, Max Jones, and that's position in the under 2 litre class, if you like, will of that. Horatio Espinosa, leading from Bob Leitzinger in the Nissan. David Loring, who's raced in Britain, also in a Nissan in 3rd spot. Well, the two Mustangs, as you see, running very close together, and that little bit of rain still spotting on the windscreen.
And plenty of oil from the teammate he's following as well. Notice the lead Mustang there smoking in the turn as he got off and got back onto the throttle, so he may be using a bit more oil than they were perhaps anticipating. That's the 12 car there, and one of the older Nissan 300ZXs being passed there, one of the GTU cars. So the Mustangs providing a nice little bit of tussling between themselves, but the Mazdas at the moment have the lead of this class. And at the front of the field again, the two Porsches from the Yost team, with German driver Bernd Schneider and John Winter in the cars respectively, in the number 7 and number 6 car, dicing furiously. The big move though at the moment, the move of the Nissan past the Jaguar, the 83 car of Brabham, 84 car of Robinson rather, getting ahead of the Jaguar. So Davy Jones down into 4th position. He won't be too worried about that particularly, although he's already got Jeff Brabham in the 83 car up his tail. But Jones will be hoping against hope that the car is all going to stay together until the end of the race, which of course it didn't in the 24-hour race at Daytona. So it's Jaguar battling away with Nissan here. The second Nissan then in 3rd position, already it's off on its way past the Jaguar on its chase of the leading Porsche duo.
Yes, Jeff Brabham, eldest of the three racing sons of Sir Jack, 38 years old, originally from Wagga Wagga, of course, in Australia, now from Lantana, Florida. And, well, he's been racing very many years, of course. Had a long period in Indy cars, from 81 right through to about 1987, raced in Indy cars regularly. Finished in 4th in the Indianapolis 500 back in 83, but really has made his name more recently in the IMSA Championship, winning in 88, 89 and 90 with the Nissan squad. And last year, very nearly won the race and finished second. Jeff Brabham, quiet man, raced in Britain for a short period in Formula 3 cars, then went off to find his fortune with Super B cars in America, and that led to the Borgering career that he now has. But going back now to the number 6 Ghost Porsche.
That's our leader. I was just looking there for the number 7 car of John Winter. He appears to have dropped back, so Schneider, as he did in the early running, looks like he's opening up a gap to his teammate. These are the cars we haven't seen so far. Fangio was second on the grid, on row 2 of the grid rather, don't forget, in his number 99 Eagle Toyota. Always expected to be fast in qualifying, but the 4-cylinder turbocharged engine is a little fragile for these long distance races, it must be fair. Again, Schneider taking some chances here in the Lappery, through the chicane there, not making any bones about it, elbowing both of those smaller cars aside. He's obviously off to set a nice gap between himself and second position. We'll be looking at tyre stops around about the Iowa mark. Whether we're going to see them in our first hour's coverage or not, we don't know yet. I would guess the slightly slippery conditions would mean that we probably won't, as the cars aren't going quite as flat out as they would be if it was hot and sunny. Back again with the camel lights in-car camera. The Denon Spice again performing strongly. Andrew?
Yeah, Martin, I just wanted to say that very impressed with this chap, Brian Bonner, who's in the Appleby's Spice Chevy, lying there around 6th, 7th position. Qualified very well, and he's sharing a car with Scott Sharp, who we've heard a little bit of, and Jeff Klein, of course, who has raced for Jaguar Le Mans a couple of years ago. But Brian Bonner, completely unknown to me, comes from Linfield, Massachusetts, and certainly not a driver that, to my knowledge, has ever raced at this sort of level before.
Well, he's driving nicely, but unfortunately his in-car camera, as you can see, isn't working quite so hot. So I hope that they'll have sorted those problems out before we come back from the break. At the moment, it's still Bernd Schneider leading the race as if there was nobody else to worry about. John Winter dropped back a little bit, and as we saw slightly earlier, the 84 Nissan of Chip Robinson, which is now past the Jaguar, setting off and dropping away the Jaguar-Nissan battle in 4th position. So it looks like Robinson is off hot on the heels of John Winter out of this fantastically fast right-hander onto the main straight. That corner absolutely flat in top gear in a real test of mettle. With the weather being so damp, we won't be looking for them to go quite as flat out as we were expecting earlier. Unlike the way they won at Daytona. Confirmation then, Schneider from Winter. Chip Robinson now clear in 3rd position and on his way after John Winter, running him in. And Davy Jones with his mirrors very full of blue and orange from the nose of Jeff Brabham's car. Brabham, of course, 3-time winner of this race, 3-time winner of the championship, 2-time winner of the race, and Nissan looking for their 3rd consecutive win.
Sebring, of course, has hosted 1 Grand Prix.
That looked like, sorry Andrew, just to butt in, this tail shot camera, we just saw the 4th position battle zooming past, and it certainly looked like the number 83 Nissan was past the Jaguar. So Davy Jones now apparently down into 5th position. Not quite sure whose camera we're benefiting from here, but that is Davy Jones confirmed down in 5th position now. So it's the 2 Porsches, the 2 Nissans, and the Singleton Jaguar dropping back. Now, whether it'll continue to drop back as the race proceeds, whether perhaps he's already starting to feel some mechanical or handling problems, I don't know. Obviously, that'll become clear when we see them pit. But Robinson and Brabham now both past Davy Jones in the Jaguar, and that won't please Davy at all. He likes to go flat out as long as he can. And Davy will be very disappointed not to be able to be on the pace in the Jaguar, although of course very fortunate to be here after an enormous accident in qualifying first thing on Thursday. These are the positions then as we go back to commentary live from the American team in Sebring.
We're back live at Sebring. You're riding with Dorsey Schrader, and they are cooking around this racetrack. 114 miles an hour the speed, 115 the record. And even though the track has been marginally wet, they're running close to record pace here, David. I think that says a lot for the equipment and the drivers.
Well, they're certainly drying it out. There's a lot of cars on here. I said a few minutes ago there's 80 cars, because it's 48 cars. It's still a pretty large field to pack into this 3.7-mile track. Of course, it is relatively long, which is nice for a 12-hour. There's nothing worse than doing these long races on short tracks.
Ford's IMSA GTO team that you're watching here, flanking another of the U division cars, have 41 wins in this division and have been the dominant force now for the last half dozen years. But this year they are considered to be an underdog to the Mazdas. And as they continue their battle for position, these cars have in fact fallen back now to 4th and 5th in position on the racetrack. The leading car in the division is Steve Millen's Nissan, and so the Fords are having to play catch-up here today, and it's a new role for this team. They have really been the team to beat in GTO for several years, but now they're going to have to test the mettle of Jack Roush and his engineers and his drivers. And there's the Ferrari coming up, and that corner speed you talked about, David, very evident there.
See the Camel Light there, much quicker into the entry of that corner. But if he can stay in front, if the GTO car, the number 12 car, can stay in front, when they get to the next long straight, he'll almost certainly pull away from that Camel Light. But overall, of course, the Camel Light, that is the second place car in that class. That's number 80. That's the Ferrari engine, will be quicker overall. Now, the thing about those GTO Mustangs there is they have got a new car coming, an all-new car. There you see a great shot out the back of that car. And there's the Ferrari engine Camel Light coming up behind. Look how he catches up on brakes. There's a bit of smoke coming up the brake there too. The driver in the Camel Light car getting a little bit frustrated. Then they come to this long straight, and the muscle of that big V8 Ford engine pulls it away. But as we come into this last corner, we're just coming up to turn 17 here. There you see, there we see, look out the front. There you see the corner coming up. There's his teammate just in front of him, the number 12 car, number 15 car rather. These guys are waiting for a new car very, very anxiously.
And there goes the Ferrari making the pass, and now he's the meat in the sandwich with the Mustangs there. Let me correct one call. The leader in that GTO class is the 75 car, but there was a last-minute driver change, and Jeremy Dale is the pilot. He'll be joined by co-driver Steve Millen later on in the event. And here is the continuing battle. The Ferrari taking the outside line, and here comes another of the light cars up to join that fray. The Tom Hessert Costas Los entry, the Buick Kudzu, which of course is built down in Georgia, and thus the name, the Kudzu, which the builder of that car, Jim Downing, is very proud of. He's the father of the Camel Light class.
And his father was the father of the Kudzu plant, I believe. They bring it in to help some problem in Georgia, and now it covers the entire state.
Rumor has it. That is Costas Los at the wheel of the car, and he has moved around the number 12 of Dorsey Schrader. And again, the superior horsepower is not always the key. Now we go back to the front of the field, and your overall leader in the race, Bernd Schneider, 1990 Porsche Cup winner, holding the advantage for the moment over his teammate John Winter. The Yost Porsches, winners at Daytona, dominating here in the early running of the 12 Hours of Sebring, the 39th running of this great classic. We'll be back with more.
Yeah. But there is the position. Bernd Schneider still leading from John Winter, then the two Nissans, and then Davy Jones. So the battle continues, coming up towards the first pit stop at the end of the first hour. And it's been a very hectic hour.
Yeah, just as we cut away there, you saw that Schneider went through about 20 seconds ahead of John Winter, and about a third of a second behind John Winter was the number 84 car of Chip Robinson. So Robinson already moving up hard on the tail of John Winter, and I shouldn't be at all surprised the way Chip's been motoring so far to see him passed in a moment or two. Another couple of laps perhaps, but this man, Bernd Schneider, despite having dropped back for reasons so far unexplained earlier on, after building up an enormous lead in the opening 5 or 10 minutes, is now still reconstructing that lead, dominant at the moment, and certainly no problem showing on the Porsche. We've seen Dorsey Schrader's Mustang smoking heavily, and that's always a bad sign. We saw lots of smoke from one of the Nissans, Chip Robinson in fact, West Palm Beach in the closing laps, and that foretold problems, but no visible signs of trouble for the Torno Porsche. Yost racing at number 6.
Yes, just to go back to that little bit of history I tried to fit in earlier, till Martin spotted a An anxious move out on the racetrack. 1959, Sebring hosted the US Grand Prix, and it was won by a young New Zealander called Bruce McLaren in a Cooper. Well, that's the only Grand Prix there's ever been at Sebring. Of course, the race moved on to Riverside and then to Watkins Glen and then on to the various street circuits, Long Beach, Detroit and so on.
And here's the leader again down the long straight, and he's already into turn one with no sign of the second place car, so John Winter must be a good 10-15 seconds behind at the moment. Be interesting if we can get a look at it. Looking at the number 98 car at the moment, that's one of the two All-American Racing Toyotas.
Andy Wallace, yeah.
That's right, Andy Wallace at the wheel of Dan Gurney's Toyota Eagle, and already coming up to be lapped. So despite the fact that they're in the top 10, they are already going to be receiving Bernd Schneider in the rear-view mirrors in the next half lap or so. Fast in qualifying, as I said before, but really too fragile for these races. Dan Gurney, though, a firm believer in getting out and having a go at it anyway.
Yeah, the great Dan Gurney actually once broke down 1 minute from the end of this race and failed to finish.
Well, that was a disaster, and it could be a disaster in a moment or two for John Winter. As we saw earlier, just a glimpse, we've now got the battle for second position. Second position at the moment, John Winter, the white car there, the number 7 Yost Porsche, and right behind him, the number 84 Nissan of Chip Robinson. Robinson opening up this stint. Of course, he has run Jeff Brabham second in this championship in the last 2 years as a Nissan driver, and wouldn't mind coming first instead of being the bridesmaid this year, I'm sure.
Now, he won the championship with the Holbert Porsche back in '87, of course, and then Brabham took over, as you said. And, a man that's come up through single-seater racing, very much a product of the Jim Russell Racing Drivers School.
So we're looking at the last bit of racing here in the towards the end of the first hour of this race. A strong battle going on for second position, and we would expect to see John Winter dispossessed in a couple of moments by the Nissan, and the Nissan's moving up into second then and fourth, because of course Brabham is already past Davy Jones, the Jaguar dropping down into fifth. We're looking at the GTO leader, Mazda, and just ahead of him, the Camel Lights leading number 48 car of Parker Johnston. So those are the class leaders at the moment. And
63 is the car that's got Bryce Corbin, Brian Redmond and John Osteen in it. Very experienced trio there. Brian Redmond, of course, over 50 now, a former Grand Prix driver, a man that did so much good work for Porsche in the 70s.
So big crowd here at Sebring for this third round of the championship, and at the moment Bernd Schneider from John Winter, but we expect to see Chip Robinson in second in a moment. Brabham now with his brother Gary still to drive in fourth position, and Davy Jones in the single Jaguar in fifth. We're going to go
Sebring, and the Jones boy does the Nielsen trick.
You know, odds, but you know, the whole momentum keeps going.
Now with only one car, 12 hours worth of strategy. What are you going to do?
Well, you know, we had, you know, obviously Raul, Bozell, and myself are in for the whole Camel GT Championship, so we need to collect points here, and that's our main concern. And it's going to be John Nielsen and Kenny Atchison, you know, help us out through the way. I believe it's going to be the three of us with Kenny Atchison standing in towards the end.
This inclement weather in central Florida, storm clouds depositing their load on the track, and several cars caught out on slicks. You can see there in that rather primitive pit road, which is Sebring at the moment, that it's rather a crowded situation. This is the leaderboard at 1/3 distance, and a familiar look about it. It's just like last year. Jeff Brabham, Derek Daly and Gary Brabham leading the way in Nissan number 83, with only their teammates in the 84 Brabham on the lead lap. Chip Robinson, Bob Earl and Julian Bailey. 99, the Toyota of Juan Manuel Fangio II and Willie T. Ribbs. Also on 116, Porsche number 7, Jelinski, Henri Pescarolo and John Winter, who did so well at Daytona. And then that Spice Chevrolet in 5th place, Spice Chevrolet number 4, after 114 laps, with Bonner Sharp and Jeff Klein. And this is the scene at Sebring as we look down the track at the moment. And nasty, wet, dirty conditions for the mechanics in pit road.
Yeah, plenty of incidents for the drivers to come back in with. Lots of cars lost a tail or a nose section, and the torrential downpour really left nobody with any chance on the wet tyres. Now, rather without the wet tyres, as they were all out on slicks at the time. So it's really messed things up, and it's going to take us a while to sort it all out again, I'm afraid.
So there's pit road. Over the top of it are the hospitality boxes, so-called, and that is a view of the track as they come down the main straight into that first turn, turn 1, which is the sweeping left-hander, which almost bends back on itself. Very difficult to negotiate. You see there Chip Robinson in Nissan number 84 taking it very wide, and this Buick Spice number 18 finding it a little bit difficult. I think he's probably given it up now, Martin.
I think so, yes. I'm surprised he got any traction at all to get off the circuit and onto the grass, but once he's there, he might as well be sitting on ice. I don't think those tyres are going to make any difference. He's just not going to get any grip there, and unfortunately, that looks like the end of their race. Disappointing way for it to end, obviously, so early on before the darkness, but I don't think the darkness will be much of a factor once they've managed to drive their way through this rain. The conditions are truly appalling.
Andy Evans was at the wheel of Camel Light number 18 when it went off, and here we see, looking after the Nissan, this is race leader number 83 in the pits, New Nose.
Yep, new nose coming on, so obviously they've had a little bit of a problem. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they're having electrical problems because of the wetness as well. Obviously these cars normally race in the dry, and waterproofing doesn't tend to be quite as thorough as you might find on a rally car, or perhaps somebody used to racing under British weather conditions. But it would look like they're going to have to fit a new nose and new grille. And we've already seen Jaguar in electronic problems after they lost the rear bodywork on their sole car, so wouldn't be surprised to see it happen to a few more people as well.
Yeah, worth mentioning that Jaguar slipped well down the leaderboard from that 5th place they were holding after the hour. 99, the Toyota Eagle going back out onto the track. This is Willie T. Ribbs and Juan Manuel Fangio II. It should take a check here on what happened to the 83 Nissan of Jeff Brabham.
Well, he's well out in the grass there, isn't he? Absolutely no doubt what happened to him. He just lost it, and it looks like he lost it in a straight as well, and he's done a bit of rally crossing, so to clean the radiators and put a new nose on, obviously absolutely fundamental here. You can see how much he's ploughing up as he tries to get back onto the track, and that is on the main straight, so he's come through the final corner onto the straight behind the pits. Perhaps not quite flat out, but certainly a little bit quicker than the car could handle. Just to note that the 99 Toyota now is the only Toyota in the race. The 98 car has already had a substantial accident in the early shower, and they are now out. So Andy Wallace and Rocky Moran are out of the race, and just Fangio and Willie T. Ribbs left in. So the 83 Nissan still up on the jacks, new tyres all round, still on wets, you'll notice, and with a brand new nose, and back out into the race, but whether they'll still be in the lead, I very much doubt. Looks like Jeff Brabham at the wheel at the moment.
Yes, which means that Brabham, having lost time not only with the spin out into the infield, but also in the pits too, this man, 84, with Julian Bailey at the wheel, going up into first place ahead of his teammate number 83.
Julian, of course, staying in the States after last weekend. He was back in Formula One for the first time since 1988, racing at Phoenix, Arizona for Lotus as a last-minute signing. And now we're starting to see the pace car. This, in fact, is the first time the pace car's been out in these foul conditions. They've obviously decided that so many people are going off that they're really going to have to settle everything down a little bit to try and sort it all out. Perhaps the lap people want to catch up with the scoring, find out who's where.
Sounds like a reasonable idea. Leading the way, you see in that cavalcade of cars behind the pace car was that Buick Spice number 54, which is the one which the young Yorkshireman drove at Daytona, Andy Hepworth, and did so well. They came home they didn't actually finish the race. They weren't still running at the checkered flag, but they were there in 3rd place in their class at the end.
Look at the conditions here, Andy, inside this GTO Mustang. The lack of a heater obviously is a major problem here because they've got nothing to blow air up onto the screen. As you know, if you sit in traffic in your own car, you have to keep the fan going to keep the windscreen clear. So not only do they have to worry with the rain, but also the misting problems inside the car are a major problem on this Sebring circuit.
Problems too on the infield as well for the spectators, and there'll be a few thousand of them here. Lap of the circuit, 3.7 miles as opposed to the over 4-mile circuit, which it was until just about 6 months ago. Going around that first turn 1, and that of course is the famous turn where Briggs Cunningham back in '54, who thought he was a Sebring specialist and could do that turn reasonably well, was suddenly surprised to see Sterling Moss going around the outside of him and waving him to let him through. "Thank you very much indeed," said Sterling, and Bruce Cunningham said, "I was actually going as fast as I could, and I was determined I wasn't going to let him past." They come back onto the infield, the part of the circuit which is twisty and turny, then a very sharp right which catches a lot of people out, particularly in these conditions. Very easy to go straight on and into the barriers, which are incredibly close at that stage. The track virtually turns back on itself, and it's running here back on and up towards the old airport part of the circuit, the airport, which in fact is still in use during the days when they're not actually racing on it. And so part of the track is still great big concrete slabs, so you actually clatter over this circuit. And then they have started to resurface it just recently, within the last couple of years. The first contractor which they employed to do it, particularly on this stretch which we see now going down here, decided after he got his pneumatic drills to work on it, and he'd gone down something round about 3 feet and was still in solid concrete, that it really wasn't worth it, and gave the contract up. They come back round this big sweeping right-hander and back into side of the pits, which is probably the best part to actually watch the race. You actually stand on top of the pit boxes. You can see right the way around that sweeping right-hander. Then the fastest part of the circuit, heading away up towards this tight hairpin, which brings them back into sight. The pit road entrance is just on the right as they come back over the start-finish line and then back down to that notorious turn 1. 3.7 miles for Sebring International Raceway. Here we are with the cars still behind the pace car. Full yellows out there, and absolutely no alternative to this. There's the 84 Nissan. We're just waiting for confirmation as to whether he did get past his teammate before the yellow was brought out, or whether the pace car came out and so delayed the 84 Nissan and allowed 83 to get out after that attention, and so still be on the lead lap. 54 leading the way right behind the pace car is the Buick Spice we were talking about. There's the 84 Nissan, and right behind him looks like the number 7 Porsche, and
yes,
they're having a terrific season.
Yes, that's right. It could be very interesting as well if they get back to racing, and these are in fact the leading 2 cars. The 84 car obviously now, if they go racing almost immediately with no kind of a lead at all over the Porsche, and as we saw earlier on, both the number 6 and number 7 Porsches are very capable of leading this race. They both have in the first hour. So it could be quite an interesting battle. If the 83 car is still a lap or so from the lead, then that would make it third. And Jaguar with an awful lot of work to do after this. Don't forget that it's going to get dark as well before this race finishes, 10 p.m. American time tonight. So that's... Okay, well, let's take it from the Americans now as we look at how the race has progressed so far.
And while the battle here is the Jaguar versus the Nissan, and that was for 3rd and 4th, and we saw a good bit of lead swapping among the Nissan and this Porsche until that number 6 car ran into a series of difficulties, and the Toyotas emerged as 1-2. That is Jeff Brabham driving at that moment. Here are the Toyotas, and this comparatively new, the newest of the GTP teams, ran in tandem for 4th and 5th for a good while. Problems for Parker Johnstone's car, expected to dominate in lights competition here today, but the gearbox packed up with Doug Peterson at the wheel, and then the broken shifting apparatus, a shift linkage rod broke on the lead Porsche, and that was when the Nissans went to the lead and in fact maintained that lead all the way. The Jaguar with a lot of problems, beginning with the electrics. The 98 Toyota ran into difficulty, and that was gearbox related. That put Rocky Moran on the sideline. The team car continues. The Jaguar with more problems, a flat tire and gone bodywork. And so that brings us more or less up to date with the Nissans in front, although as we noted just a moment ago, Brabham has had an off-course excursion and subsequent mechanical problem and has fallen back into the pack. Here we see GTO cars, the big sedan-style automobiles, and they've been having perhaps the best race of the day, David. A lot of position shuffling in class.
Cleaning that windscreen in there. You see the guys at the pits were helping to clean the screen. They're probably putting some anti-mist stuff on, changing the windscreen on the Mazda. Marty Reed, are you down there?
Yes, David, believe it or not, when John Osteen brought the car in, he overshot the pit. The window was so foggy, he couldn't see the pit. They came all the way down towards Toyota, which is 3-4 pits away. The crew came running out and pushed him back. That's how bad the fog can get inside these cockpits.
Well, that's one way to deal with a fogged-up windshield. Change it, eh?
Yeah, I was going to say, they change the windscreen every time it fogs up. They're in deep trouble.
They are working on the engine in that 15 car that we saw a moment ago. That is the Robbie Gordon, Max Jones, and Dorsey Schrader entry. Let's go down to Gary Lee. I believe Gary's there.
Well, the same problem down here in the Whistler Mustang pit. In fact, they were caught out there when the downpour arrived. They came in, changed to the rain tires, and then they went back out, actually cut a tire down on the 12 car, came back in and changed to the intermediate area. Now that's something we really haven't seen all that much in the past in racing. On the road courses, we've seen the slicks for the dry conditions, and we've seen the Gatorback Eagle rain tires for the slick conditions. But here we have, as we talked earlier in the show, the intermediate, which means they're grooving their own tire. Interesting combination, and right now Mother Nature is certainly adding her challenge to the always challenging Sebring event.
Well, this downpour that hit about 3:45 here, Sebring time, and again, you are watching these pictures live. This downpour caught everyone out. They were on slick tires, and there was no time to get them changed. The track was immediately puddled, and we had cars all over the place. And the caution period under which we now find ourselves is a direct result of that downpour. Not the rain itself that stopped the event, but a mishap as a result of the rain and the slick conditions. Everybody scrambled into the pits and got their rain tires on, and now they'll play the guessing game as to what will be the proper tire to be able to maintain the closest thing they can to racing speed once we go back to a green flag condition. You're riding around on a soggy afternoon with the Dorsey Schrader John Fergus team in their Mustang, and at this moment, we'll double check, I believe that is Fergus at the wheel of that car. John, a graduate of the SCCA Clubman ranks. Here is the 33 car in the lights division, the smaller, lighter weight prototypes, Almo Capelli of Italy and Jay Hill of Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, and they are currently leading in the lights division, or at least they were until they pulled in for that pit stop. Now, the team with which they have battled for the lead, well, here is the 80 car of Martino Finotto and Ruggiero Malgrati, the Italians in the Ferrari Spice, the Fury Racing entry, and they had been racing with Capelli and Hill for the lead. Their day ended on the hook, and as we say, ironically, that occurred after a collision with the team car. Their teammates, Uli Beery and John Graham, the Canadians in the other Ferrari, and they clunked together and went to the sidelines.
Well, Capelli and Hill now have got a pretty good run because their two absolute main competitions have been taken out. The 80, which had the Ferrari V8 engine in it, was really giving the 48 Acura a run for its money, and those two guys were running away with the class. Well, as we saw, the Acura had like a 2-hour stop to change the gearbox. The 80 car is obviously out, which is going to give the 33 car a bit of breathing room, but there's still an awfully long way to go in this race.
We are, in fact, at this moment, halfway through this 6-hour race. Good time to take a look at our Audi race recap. The leader is Julian Bailey in the 84 Nissan, having run 603.1 miles at mid-race. 10 lead changes among 4 cars, with a couple of cars on the lead lap, both Nissans, and the average speed beginning to drop a little with the yellow here, 107.94 miles per hour. That is well off the race record, but that is certainly hustling pretty well in the downpour, as they were at about 3:45. Now, the third place automobile, this Toyota, has come on pit road. Marty Reed is there. Marty?
Guys, it looks as though they are having problems with the windshield wiper. They came in once, they changed the wiper, but it didn't seem to work. They're back in again. They've got the nose off. You can see them working right on the very front of the car. And David, maybe you could best explain what it would be like to be out there without any kind of blade.
Well, of course, when you're going at 160 miles an hour, it's not too bad because all the rain scoops over the top. But when you're under a caution, funnily enough, that's the worst time of all because it all sticks to the screen, and of course, that's when the screen misses up most of all.
And so as they try to, look here, here's the end. This is exactly the situation you talked about.
Exactly, because he can't reach it on his own, you see. The screen's too far away.
Now, would that have been a piece of equipment that he was given on the pit stop, or would they routinely have that tucked away in their kit of gear somewhere?
Well, on a day like today, you may well have that in the car all the time. That is Dorsey Schrader in there.
That's right. Dorsey's good enough to clean the camera lens for us. And
Still not very happy with it. Of course, the trouble is the wretched thing slides around on the floor and you can't find it.
So, Dorsey Schrader out having fun on a Saturday afternoon drive in the rain. We're at Sebring. We're live, and we'll be back with more of the 12 hours right after this timeout.
And plodding around behind the pace car, Julian Bailey leading in the Nissan number 84. Jeff Brabham in Nissan number 83 is in second place. Juan Manuel Fangio the second, Toyota 99 in third. Then Henri Pescarolo in the lead Porsche number 7, followed by Jeff Klein, who's driving the Chevrolet Spice. All those cars within 4 or 5 laps of each other.
Gordon, there's still some ponding out there, so despite the fact it's not actually raining hard right now, it's still treacherous out there.
Yeah, the Sebring track's real rough, and it leaves puddles in the bumps, so it's still, we got our rain tires on right now, and it's still real wet out there.
We made the observation just a few minutes ago that you have one rain tire that comes from the factory that way, and then you're grooving your own, what we call the intermediate rain tire, and that's what you're on right now.
Yeah, the intermediate will work in the rain, and also it'll work for an hour if it dries out. And that's what we put on in the beginning to work for the first hour of the race, and then it was raining real bad, so we put some rains on a little while ago, and Dorsey's on intermediates right now, and we're on rain, so we'll see what's the best.
Well, keep in mind, this is an off-track champion, an off-road champion right here that can probably drive as well sideways as anybody here this weekend. He can have the real advantage.
Well, he doesn't want to go off track today like young Gary Brabham did. It's an interesting conundrum there. The first car on the full range will definitely be quicker when this race gets underway. But of course we are in Florida, and although it's cold for Florida, it's still in the 60s, there's a strong wind blowing, the rain has stopped, the track will dry out pretty quickly, and then the car that's on intermediates may well come into its own because it'll be able to maintain a much better pace on a damp to drying track than the one that's on full wets, which in fact will have to dry out, which will have to change tires altogether.
Keeping those guys hopping down on pit road, let's go right back down to Marty.
Well, one piece of trivia before we go back green. 3 out of the last 5 years, the team that's been leading at the midway point has won the race, so better than 50-50 chance, you might say. One other thing, guys, it's not stopped raining, and could you send Vidal Sassoon for Gary and I?
Vidal Sassoon just polished for me and Dave, right? I tell you what, I do want to say that at the beginning of this race, we were all excited about Bernd Schneider, who was going so fast, and we were talking about this being a sprint these days. Do you drive these cars like a sprint? Well, Bernd Schneider paid the price. One of the problems with that car was he burnt the brakes out, and of course he came in for a premature brake change, and of course that's cost them dear in this race.
Let's take a look at the standings. The Nissan's running 1-2 in the GTP class. The Toyota is third with Fangio at the controls. Pescarola and Klein rounding out the top 5. Again, that is the GTP cars. Here are the light division standings with Capelli leading Morgan, Finotto, and that is the car that has crashed. Still being shown in third. The car is circulating slowly under yellow. Graham and Hesser rounding out the top 5 there. The smaller, lighter weight prototype cars. In the GTO division, the larger of the 2 sedan classes, the 15 car of Max Jones running ahead of the Mazda of Price Cobb. Remember, this race was led early on by the Nissan. In fact, Johnny O'Connell, one of the drivers of that lead car, it has now slipped to 5th. And so, as we mentioned at the top of the show, it has become a Roush Racing Mustang versus Mazda battle up front. And here's your U-Class standings. David Loring on top, Alex Jobe running in the second spot, Peter Urea is third, Brad Hoyt and Rob Wilson rounding out the top 5, and that takes you through all 4 divisions of competition here as this field come down with just a couple of straightaways to go, and we'll be back to green flag racing here at Sebring. And we talked, David, before we came on the air about the fact that when you come to Sebring, you bring your cool suit, your ice chest, and everything that you need for hot weather racing. But today it's a Silverstone kind of a Saturday, isn't it?
It is certainly more like Silverstone than Sebring. Wrong S today. Today you need your blanket, your overshoes, your galoshes, your hat, your gloves. And these guys are going to have a miserable time for the next few laps. Look at that spray just off the one lead car. Just imagine what it's like towards the back of the pack.
How would you like to be the 45th guy in line there? That lead car, Julian Bailey, gets the jump in part as a result of that and begins to open up the separation. The headlights are on, and this is the premature darkness of the rain spray here, looking down the long start-finish straightaway at Sebring as we get back to green flag racing just about 5 minutes past the midway point in this 12-hour. Now, moving up into second position on your screen, but not on the racetrack, is the Henri Pescarolo Porsche, one of the great veterans of international road racing competition and endurance competition. And he has locked on to the rear wheels of the leader, Julian Bailey, trying to unlap himself. This is the car 12, the second entry from the Roush Racing team, originally entered for Schrader and Fergus, and Gary Lee is there.
Well, actually, I'm back here with Robbie Gordon again, and you were talking to your teammate. He kind of shrugged. What seems to be the problem?
I don't know. They're changing their windshield. I can't really see inside there. I think it's all fogged up. They're going to put a fog windshield on and see if that can help out.
Well, they've taken the doghouse off as well, that front clip, so perhaps there's a problem under the hood as well?
They're putting intermediate tires on the front, just checking everything up while we're here.
It's an unfortunate stop to have to make because they have just gone back to green. You really don't want to be sitting in the pits at this juncture, but again, that car, they are swapping drivers around there. Schrader, Fergus, Gordon, Jones, all sharing two cars, and that's pretty typical in this kind of competition. Sometimes makes it difficult to keep straight who's in which car. Right now, this is Julian Bailey in the leading car, the red, white, and blue Nissan, being pursued by Henri Pescarola in the Porsche, and those second on the
Jaguar
race.
that's taken over. That's the number 3 Jaguar now.
It is indeed.
Just slept up into second place. Now, the Jaguar in weather like this will actually have a bit of an advantage because they've got that the V12 normally aspirated engine, so they have a longer, smoother power. The only trouble is, of course, that this car is, in fact, miles down at the moment.
17th on the field, 17th in position, but many, many, many laps behind. They have had all sorts of different difficulties today. Most recently, a flat tire that actually tore the engine cover off, and you saw that in our recap package. So though it may be the fastest car on the track right now, he's well behind.
Now he's giving the spray to Julian Bailey in the 84 car.
Here's the 91 car off course. This is one of the 2 Corvettes in the field. Scott Legacy, John Heinrichs, Don Knowles, and Stuart Hayner with one of the ZR1s. These are the only real production automobiles in the race. Those came off the showroom floor and were extensively modified to go racing here. And right now they've modified the shape of the bodywork a little bit up against the Armco.
Now the 84 car there falling back into the clutches again of Henri Pescarolo in the 7. Henri, that's the number 83 car. That's second place on our chart, not second place, of course, on the track right at the moment. Coming up to pass the Stanley Dickens-driven Porsche 962, owned by Moretti. GM Piero Moretti makes the best spaghetti in the paddock. Number 83 car with a new nose. Of course, that nose had to be replaced after that off-course excursion, and whilst they were changing that, they had a look under the bonnet, or the hood, as you chaps would call it over here.
Yeah, we Americans. Indications are that Gary Brabham, I believe, has stayed in the 83 car. So despite the off-course excursion, and here's more trouble. Obviously, the selection of tires, not an exact science, and I think that would be Andy Evans, George Robinson, and Carlos Bodega in the Bobeda Racing Buick Spice off-course, but no harm done, and back underway. Probably a pit stop, or maybe not. Just keep on going.
Well, it depends if he feels he damaged the undertray in any way at all. And, of course, the other thing is, you know, these noses are so low that if you go off the road, like Gary did, for instance, you have to come in and really have it looked at because it digs into the ground and it can break the fitting. And so it's as well to just have it looked at. And those are so vital, of course, for the downforce on these cars.
Okay, we have had an indication that indeed the Brabham brothers have swapped spots, and it is Jeff at the controls of the 83 car now, a man who very much wants to win a race. Jeff Brabham has not won since last August. He's on a 5-race losing streak, which for the man who holds 3 consecutive championships in this division is an eternity. And he's trying to play catch-up right now to his teammate's car as Julian Bailey continues to lead the race in number 84. I think it's remarkable with all of the teams that have come here over the years. Let's give a listen to this car.
Yeah, that 84 car has got a misfire.
Let's see if we can hear it here.
No, but it is definitely misfiring when it goes past the booth here. And that car had a misfire earlier on.
Yeah, this is not the first time. They had it fixed. They thought, let's see if we can find out more about this by going to Marty Reed.
Checking with the Nissan crew, guys, what they have told us is that, yes, during both yellows, they have experienced a load up, and it just they can't seem to clear it out at the early get-go. It did go away before, but as you said, right now, they're still having troubles getting it cleared out.
Well, it's a kind of problem to have, is one that'll fix itself, David, because it means that you don't have to come on pit road for service. But I would think until it clears out, they're going to be a little nervous.
Yeah, it's great when you get one of those misfires after a caution period and it loads up, and it's terrific when it goes away. It's not so good when it doesn't go away and you have to come in basically have the plugs changed.
Here is the 84 car leading the race. Julian Bailey, misfire and all, maintaining his advantage. We're working the second half of the 12 hours of Sebring, and we'll be back with more of it live from Sebring, Florida, right after this. Sebring for many years in racing, and as you can see, things don't always go smoothly at Sebring, just as they have not always gone smoothly here today. But great drivers and great cars always put on a great show, David Hobbs. And here we see one of them right here. Oops, look out for the big guys on the outside. All that business about differentiation of classes and speed differences has applied for many, many years here at this race that was born in 1952 on the old bomber base at Sebring, and today is alive and well with thousands of fans ignoring the bad weather and watching this car, now driven by Chip Robinson. And let's update that. There was a driver change on the last pit stop. It is Chip Robinson at the controls of the 84 car in place of Julian Bailey, who was driving it when the rain showers began.
And when it went by here on the last lap, that misfire certainly to me sounded like it had gone away. So it'll be interesting to see now if Chip Robinson can pull back the gap between himself and the Jaguar in front.
Can you give me a 25-word analysis of why the car begins to misfire into the yellow?
Well, it's just a case of they pump too much fuel in on the low throttle opening rate it's doing. It literally does just fuel up the spark plugs in the cylinders. And of course, with these turbo engines, you've got to run plenty of fuel through to try and keep them cool. So when they open them up, they just for a few laps they pop and sputter and throw out black smoke and big jets of flame, and then it clears away. Hopefully.
Once they clear away, right, they're capable of 170-mile-an-hour speeds here at Sebring, one of the fastest courses in IMSA competition. Smaller cars like the GTU machine here of Monterrato Espinoso, about 40 to 50 miles an hour slower than that. We watch the GTO competition, and we'll double check on that leader. I believe it is still the 63 car, Cobb, Osteen, and Redmond. Sitting out front, the Mazdas have swapped the lead, and whoa, way to the outside of the racetrack goes that
well,
number
now you see the problem was there. He trying to be a nice guy and let that GTP car go through, but of course got himself well and truly into the wet, and nearly just had too much speed and carried himself off the road.
This is, in fact, the lights leader. After the Finotto crash, the shuffling of positions has given the lights lead.
The number 8 car.
This car, yeah, it is the number 8 car. Charles Morgan and Jim Pace in the Miller Genuine Draft Buick Kudzu have taken the lead, and now we have a crash. The number 94 car, not the first time today, that the Generati, Paul Tavilli, and GW Church machine have been in trouble, and he's facing the wrong way against the traffic.
Right on pit straight, right in front of us here. He just made a complete fish of that last call. Now he's making even more of a fish. I think he's trying to drive it off the track and get out of the way.
Yeah, indeed, he is doing the right thing, because that's a very, very vulnerable position right there. Ooh, and into the mist and out of the way.
And into the pit. Well, that's one way getting into the pit, I suppose.
Well, I think all things considered, David, they probably did the right thing, because those cars actually go off that corner running how fast and coming right at you.
Now, he's left some debris also right in the middle of the track, which, of course, is going to be completely blind to the drivers as they come around that long last corner.
Unofficially, we show that as GW Church in that car at the time of the mishap and out of harm's way, and we'll hope that that debris on the track does not cause any problem. Chip Robinson is leading here in the 12 hours of Sebring, hampered in the last, now, say, 45 minutes by rain. Here is the debris on the track as a result of the Church incident. His car simply out of control off the final turn into the wall, and it has left debris at the outside of the corner. There's a lot of that debris laying around here, David. This happens to be right in our view, but we've noted throughout the afternoon here that there's just a lot of parts left on the racetrack.
I guess he hit that big puddle there and aquaplaned into the wall, and then of course he had to drive back against the traffic just for a few yards there to make sure he could get into the pits, which was in fact the best thing he could have done in the circumstances.
There you had a good sense of the speed differential as we watched Robinson come blitzing by a couple of the slower cars in the field, and now under heavy braking you see the sparks underneath. Rough racetrack here in Sebring. It's always been that way.
Robinson now under extreme pressure from Bob Wallach in the number 6 car, that just streaked away from this field at the beginning of the race and went and hid. and built itself a long lead.
Now 6 laps down, and Wallach trying to unlap himself after a succession of problems that began with broken shift linkage. Later, Massimo Segala took the car off course and trying to catch up and broke the nose. The very problems you talked about that required an additional pit stop. They had the brake problem from Bert Schneider setting the fast early pace, so it was a succession of little problems that have put them now 6 laps down. An indication that the safety car will be needed here at this juncture, and I think that is probably to clean up that debris at the head of the pit straightaway, or the start and finish line straightaway. So once again, we will be going back under yellow. The effect of the yellow on the driver's concentration. David, we just come off 1 yellow. Perhaps quickly, does it make that much difference?
Well, it does, actually. It definitely breaks your concentration. You get into a nice rhythm. It's just going well, and suddenly the caution flag comes out, and you have to cruise around for 5 laps. Of course, on a long course like this, 3.7 miles is long.
It's going to take them a few minutes to get the field gathered up. The safety car will be coming out to pick up the leader, Chip Robinson. The fans are here despite the rain. It's the 12 hours of Sebring, and ESPN's live coverage continues after this.
So Chip Robinson and Jeff Brabham, the 2 Nissans, the twin Nissans at the head of the field. In 3rd place, Henri Pescarolo, and bad memories of this racetrack for Henri Martin, because exactly the spot where we saw that GTO car clatter into the barrier after it had presumably spun in that big puddle was exactly the spot last year where a similar car went into the barrier. Pescarolo came round in his Porsche and smacked straight into it, and that was the end of his race, and his confidence was very badly shaken after that.
Yeah, he's had a fairly quiet season last year after that, but he's back and storming again in the American Championship this year, so obviously he's got his confidence back again. We were having a little bit of an argument earlier, weren't we, Andy, that the contents of the number 84 Nissan, we were fairly certain wasn't Julian Bailey unless he'd nicked somebody else's helmet. And as the Americans pointed out, in fact, it is Chip Robinson leading the race now, just to reconfirm that, the 84 car. Back under the yellow, this is going to be a really, really long 12 hours if this kind of thing continues. If the rain comes back in the darkness, you can be pretty sure there's going to be a lot more spare parts lying around on the circuit, which will mean pace cars and brooms. So it could be a pretty long day for these guys.
The marshals here at Sebring are pretty good. They're well trained. Obviously, they've been used to it for years and years and years. And because there are so many IMSA races in Florida, they tend to travel about from track to track. But Sebring is a particular favourite of them all because basically because of the atmosphere here. Absolutely marvellous place, and great for marshals, spectators, the whole shebang.
Here we just had a quick in-car look at Dorsey Schroeder, the window cleaner, doing his job with this squeegee on the windscreen again. Just to reiterate that the Gold Coast Grand Prix, the first round of the Card IndyCar PPG Championship, which is happening overnight UK time in Australia, will be shown on Thursday on Screensport, and that promises to be a thrilling race. The IndyCar reigning champion Alan Sir Jr. on 3rd position on the grid, but Michael Andretti and former Formula One driver Eddie Cheever are in fact occupying row 1 on the grid. Beautiful warm weather in Surfers Paradise, and this race now due to go ahead tonight UK time is going to cause an awful lot of furore between the governing body FISA, of course, and CART, who run the IndyCar Championship. But that shouldn't affect too many of the drivers in this field, except perhaps Julian Bailey.
Now that a lot of that's been taken away, and the driver's going to have to work much harder, and it's going to be more tiring on them.
They've repaved most of the track with asphalt, except for the corners they did in concrete again, and it's rougher in the corners now than it ever was before.
The risk you've got to take going around here are much greater.
The corners are tighter, and obviously you use all the track as a racing line, so it does bunch the cars up a bit more rather than longer straightaways or sweeper corners where you can you know, race side by side with the car. Now a car is more blind to you from behind.
There's no question that the track's very bumpy, and that's a major issue when you come to set the race cars up, and it's a major issue when you try and last the 12 hours of Sebring. You know, that really beats the cars and the drivers up pretty bad.
As we watch them bump their way around under the yellow flag, the guys who really liked this place over the years include these great names. Look at the list of previous winners: Andretti, Hill, Jean-Avion, and Stuck, with 3 wins each. 4 drivers have won this race 3 times. The late Al Holbert won it twice. Hurley Haywood broke a record by starting his 19th Sebring today. but his car owner has crashed that car, and it doesn't appear that Hurley will join the exclusive company of three-time winners here. The two-time winners, Walters, Ix, Fangio, Hans Hermann, Brian Redman, and Bob Aiken. Truly, over the years, this has been an international classic, David, that the great drivers have all come here to compete in. In Europe, this race has just had a tremendous reputation.
And they've all had a win except you-know-who. Brian Redman there with 2 wins could make that 3 today, winning the GTO class.
Here is the lead car circulating under yellow. We'll go to pit road for more on the tire story with Gary Lee.
But David Hobbs just said he had not won this race. However, he did win a Formula 5000 race here back in 1969. David, I'm going to give you age away, but I was still in high school. We've talked a lot about tires here.
Well, you always were retarded.
Here's our slick. This is for the dry conditions, and this is the factory-produced rain tire. And this is what we call the intermediate. For those of you that are fans of sprint car racing, midget racing, you've seen this unit used on dirt tracks. This is a tire groover. They come up with this template, make their chalk lines here, warm this up, and actually groove the tires. As we heard Robbie Gordon say earlier, this tire in dry conditions will go for some distance. However, this tire in a dry condition will not last very long. Something we haven't seen often, the intermediate rain tire here at Sebring.
Well, I'm glad it was pointed out that you won that Formula 5000 race here, and I think that intermediate tire may be a real key to getting around here quickly once we go back to green.
Well, of course, the other thing that's going to help the intermediate boys now is that under this caution, it still hasn't rained again, so the track will still be drying out steadily, and of course the intermediate guys could go on for another hour, whereas the people on wets will have to stop the check.
Here's your top 5. Robinson leading and his teammate Brabham pursuing. Pescarola 3rd, Klein 4th, and Wallach in 5th. Pretty good representation of brands there. Your light leader, Aldo Capelli, Charles Morgan in pursuit, Martino Minotto still 3rd as they circulate under yellow. That gives you an idea of how much lead that car had at the point that it crashed. Actually, it was battling with Capelli for the lead, but he is still shown 3rd. He will steadily descend the ladder there as that car has crashed, and that brought out the caution just as we were coming on the air. Max Jones is now leading the GTO division in the Mazda Mustang battle for supremacy. He's in the Mustang. Price Cobb is 2nd in the Mazda. Morton in another Mazda rides 3rd. Ferguson, another Mustang, is 4th. And the first Nissan is Johnny O'Connell, who held the early lead, and he is now 5th. And the GTU division, led by David Loring, with Alex Job in the number 2 spot, Urea, Hoyt, and Wilson, rounding out the top 5 in this unique 12-hour grind for 4 different classes of competition. And when we come back, we'll hope to get quickly back to a green flag condition. We're live at Sebring, and we'll be right back.
Come back to Sebring, and still operating under the yellow, of course. Julian Bailey and Chip Robinson in the lead. Chip Robinson at the wheel ahead of his teammate Jeff and Gary Brabham in the 83 Nissan. And parked up at the side of the Sebring track there is the Nissan 240, which is the GTO car, number 96.
Yes, that's the Leitzinger brothers, and they appear to have had a spin and have stalled the car under the yellow, which must be some kind of a record. But they would appear to be giving up there, so that's the end of their afternoon's work. Another couple of laps, perhaps, for them to continue the sweeping up. It all appears to be pretty clear there on the final corner coming onto the pit straight, so although they're still under yellow, hopefully we should get racing again pretty soon. But it could well turn out to be one of those afternoons that never really gets underway. Stop-start conditions very much in this rain. We're probably likely to see, even though it's stopped raining now the better part of 40 minutes, we're pretty likely to see a few more incidents before the night is out, I'm sure. Humidity is still very high, and the chance of rain must be pretty good again.
There we go, looking down the top 10, and Jaguar not showing after making a reasonably decent early start. Juan Manuel Fangio the second, dropping down into the lower half of the top 10. 84 Nissan weaving about immediately behind the pace car. Maybe he's got some information that the race will be on as they come around into the start-finish line next time around.
Davy Jones, of course, by making his way past the leader after the last pace car disappeared in pretty promptly, has done himself a big favour. He's now able to pick up an entire lap, unlap himself once, without having to race for it. He can just cruise around and catch up the tail of the field, and then he's just got to make his way back past this lot again to unlap himself a second time. But getting smartly past the leader saved him an awful lot of effort in catching up that lap. So that was a lucky break for him that the pace car came out as quickly after the first caution as it did.
Going to go round on this very bumpy part of the circuit. There are certain changes in the track surface as they make their way round. Sometimes it's those great big slabs of concrete. Sometimes it's nice, flat, easy tarmac, as it seems to be here. But once they come back onto that start-finish straight, back onto the old airfield circuit there, you can see that the bumps start all over again, and the driver's head starts bobbing around in the cockpit.
Yep, as the guys were saying earlier, it's a pretty rough circuit to race, and the resurfacing hasn't made too much of a difference to it. So the spectators finding something to do, and the airfield still operating despite the fact that there's a race on part of it. But as you can see from the guys here sitting on top of their camper, the weather has cleaned up a little bit. The track certainly appears to be drying out, so we're going to see the guys on intermediate tyres now at the best advantage. Nobody on slicks, of course, it's been wet for so long. But the full wets, once the rain has disappeared and the track starts to dry out, will almost immediately become a handicap compared to the intermediate hand-cut tyres. So we could see a bit of reshuffling, because anybody who's pushing hard on wets is not going to be able to sustain that and is going to have to pit pretty quickly. So the guys who at the moment are on intermediates are looking aces in. Now look at this weather. If you think it's been wet today, look back to 1960s when it was more of a swimming race at Sebring, with Porsches and Ferraris and the whole works wallowing about up to their gunnels in water. That's certainly the kind of weather we could do without here. Let's have a look at this with some American soundtrack too. Okay, well, we won't do that. We're back live at Sebring, and it looks now as if we're under the green again. We are, and immediately unlapping himself is the number 6 Porsche that Bernd Schneider, of course, ran into the ground in the early going. But don't forget that the 84 Nissan is still leading, Andy.
Gone past half distance, 5.5 hours remaining of this race, sweeping by under the bridge which leads on into the infield, and 99 going through there was Juan Manuel Fangio the second. 87, this GTO car clattered into the wall, and those walls are pretty hard, as you can see there. That's John Annis, local man from Tampa in Florida. Anthony Pulio driving the car at the time, apparently.
And that's right on the pit straight again, just after that big puddle that we've seen so often, and that is an almost action replay of what brought out the last yellow. Now you can see the bits and pieces have actually, fortunately, flown behind the wall, and he is pretty much enough off the racing line that unless somebody hits that puddle and has a huge tank slapper, he should be safe enough. But the yellow flags are out just in case. So we're not back racing again.
Yeah, there is a fair amount of debris left on the outside of the track. On the inside of the track now you can see it. And obviously...
Paleo's still in the car as well, sorting his thoughts out, I would imagine. Judging by the state of the front of it, he must have clipped it pretty quickly. Obviously not too much frontal damage, so it looks like he got sideways and got dragged in by having a tyre hit the concrete, which is a fairly standard sort of situation. The track is drying on the line, though, as we can see here. Not much of spray coming up from the cars. Of course, they're not at full race speed yet. Correction, they are at full race speed, but still not much spray. So we can see that even following as close as Brabham is here to the Porsche ahead of him, it's just the big puddles that are really causing a problem. That is the one, of course, that caused that spin just outside the pits we were just seeing a moment ago.
See the huge chunk of rubber which came up, which presumably is left from the 96 car, which is parked at the side there, rather indelicately parked. But the huge chunk of rubber which just came up, what happens is that, of course, the rubber gets trapped in between these great segments of concrete. Occasionally somebody will go over it and it comes spinning out. If you're lucky, you miss it, but otherwise you get it full in the windscreen.
So having said that they were full racing speed again, there is the pace car picking up the leader. So as Davy Jones did the last time the pace car went in, The number 6 Porsche there did itself an awfully big favour. Just by getting a couple of lengths ahead of the Nissan, it's made up an entire lap. He can now carry on as flat out as he dares to pick up the tail of this field and save himself all the effort of having to race round and keep ahead of the Nissan. So saved himself several laps work making himself up a lap. But again, another very disappointing pace car situation. This is the Camel Lights leader, the Kudzu Buick, down from Georgia. Kudzu, as we're reliably informed, is some sort of vegetation that cattle browse on down there, basically because they can't grow grass in the salt conditions of the soil. And Charles Morgan leading the lights class. Perhaps a bit of a surprise this, after Parker Johnston's Acura engine Spice has dominated the category in not only West Palm Beach, the sprint race that we saw last week, but also, of course, in the 24 Hours of Daytona. Absolutely walked away with it. But the Buick having a chance now, and the car right behind him, 33, is in fact second in class. So that is the Camel Lights battle. Parker Johnstone's car having suffered several problems. There's the leaderboard, confirmation that the Brabham car is still in second position behind his teammate Chip Robinson. And Pescarolo in the number 7 car is in fact right behind Robinson on the track at the moment, although 2 laps down on the leaders. Klein in 4th position, and Bob Wallach just unlapping himself, as we saw there, in the number 6 car at the wheel at the moment, in 5th position and making himself up a lap. So he'll be only 3 laps behind the leaders once he catches up the train that the pace car's leading at the moment. That's the GTO leading Mustang, and there is the overall race leader behind the pace car.
So Julian Bailey and his teammate Chip Robinson leading the way behind the pace car there. Chip Robinson still at the wheel. I don't think that they've changed since the last time that we saw them close up. So Chip Robinson there. Derek Daly, of course, is one of the drivers that we haven't mentioned, who's in the Nissan team and capable of shifting around from car to car. They will only score points depending on which car, where the car finishes, which they first started in. That's the only way that you score points in IMSA racing. Derek Daly last year won this race, of course, but didn't get any points because he'd started in a different car. Neither I think did Jeff Brabham, because they both switched cars. Nice victory for Derek Daly, because it was on St. Patrick's Day, and this being St. Patrick's Day Eve, perhaps he reckons that he's got another chance of doing it this year.
Well, he's got to be hopeful, obviously, with the Nissans the way they are at the moment. And in fact, Brabham is just 2 or 3 cars on the road behind Robinson in this little pace car queue, as well as actually on the leaderboard. But between them, of course, is Pescarolo, who will have to do some unlapping to try and catch up. That's the light situation. Olmo Capelli, the Italian, still leads Charles Morgan. So, in fact, we're getting a little bit behind on our lap scoring compared to the situation on the track. Martino Finotto, though, in the Ferrari engine car has crashed, and so will be unlikely to retain 3rd position much longer in Camel Lights once they get back to racing.
So still the yellow flag flying, the pace car still out, various cars including, looks like the Camel Lights leader taking the opportunity to pit at this stage. And the Whistler Mustang's going particularly well, although that pit stop, I think, was earlier on was a wee bit of a problem. Go down and find out what's happening down in the pits with Del
Yeah,
Gordon.
I like the rain. I was having a good time. It was a little tough. We lost the wiper and it just wasn't working. So when you got behind a lot of cars throwing water up, it was really difficult to see. But I felt like we were making ground on them. And the Whistler Mustang otherwise is running great. It's not hasn't missed a beat all day, and we're just running along out there.
Lots of smiles down here in the Whistler pit. Let's go down the pit road now to Marty Reed.
Well, Raul Boisel is climbing in as Davy Jones climbs out. The number 3 Jag has been plagued by problems. It's almost the same scenario, just a different set of problems as it was for them back at the 24 Hours of Daytona. First having the number 1 car crash out, then they end up with 50% of their force here as well, and then where they overheated at Daytona, here they've had a bunch of electrical problems. They changed the spark box, they changed the EC unit. I mean, they have done everything, and right now you can see they're going for brakes, tires, everything, and it's going to cost them probably another lap, as the field will probably get around before they get these brakes changed.
Well, I think that additional loss of a lap is probably not a huge issue as far down as they are.
Well, no, it's not, but it's a bit unusual to see them change the brake pads, because I thought I saw them changing those earlier on. I saw the same gentleman or another guy grappling with that same tool, which presses back the presses back the pistons to allow you to put the new big pads into the big pads in these long-distance cars.
Well, the whole key in endurance racing is to hang in there. No matter what the problem, get as many laps on the board as possible. And remember, too, they are running for a season championship, not just a victory in one race. Here's your top 5 overall, rounding out the top 10, and we'll be right back.
So the Nissans lead. Nissans 1 and 2, a repeat performance from last year on the cards? Well, maybe. It's certainly Japanese cars leading the way, 1, 2 and 3, with Toyota number 99, Juan Manuel Fangio, running now in 6th place. The Porsche number 7, Henri Pescarolo, up there in 4th. Jeff Klein in the Chevy Spice, also operating in the top 6. There you see the amount of hammer that these brakes take around Sebring. Absolutely piping hot as they take them off, those brake pads from the wheel, cool them down in the old puddles. And it's Julian Bailey, Chip Robinson in the Nissan, leading the Sebring 12-hour race as we go past half distance.
Tuesday night. The Jaguars, Nissans, Toyotas and Porsches have been running right through the night and are now approaching the closing stages of the 12 hours of Sebring Grand Prix. Let's join the action.
Nissan versus Toyota, Porsche against Jaguar. The Sebring 12 hours thunders into the night with the Nissans heading for their 3rd victory. America's oldest sports car race is set for a tight finish. Coming up in just a moment on Screensport. Good morning and welcome to Sebring, where, as you see, it is heading into the night. That's the time difference for you. I'm Andrew Marriott, with me Andy Smith, and the Nissan's very much in control, Andy.
Just as last year when they finished a good 1-2, but remember that last year was a fascinating finish which went right to the final lap, everybody closing up as a result of cautions. We've had a lot of those during this race. This is the position at 3/4 distance, 83, with the IMSA champion Gary Brabham, Jeff Brabham, alongside his brother Gary. Derek Daly, last year's winner, in there too. Chip Robinson, Bob Earl and Julian Bailey in the 2nd Nissan number 84. Only those 2 cars on the lead lap at the moment. And that Porsche number 7 closing up. So too Porsche number 6 with brilliant Bob Wallach doing most of the driving throughout the night. And that Chevrolet Spice on 217 laps with the most familiar name in that driver lineup, Jeff Klein, who had a spell, of course, with Jaguar at Le Mans a couple of years ago.
Yes, and the best of the Toyotas you see in 6th place, Juan Manuel Fangio the 2nd, and Willie T. Ribbs. Well, the lights cutting through the darkness. Very difficult to see the apexes here on what was originally a US bomber base of Sebring on the west coast of Florida.
Yes, been a magnificent sight for motor racing. The circuit changed a bit over the last couple of years. It's now down to about 3.7 miles. But we can pick up the highlights of the race so far.
Green flag fell at 10:16 this morning, and Bernd Schneider took off like a scared rabbit, jumped out into the early lead over the Porsche of John Winter, the Jaguar of Davy Jones, and then the Nissans, who at that point were 4th and 5th. The Jaguar had electrical problems early on within the first couple of hours of the race, and they had to replace some of the electronics to try to get the car back on course, and that was the beginning of a long downhill slide. Meanwhile, the 84 Nissan setting its sights on the 2nd place car, the number 7 Porsche, which surrendered that spot subsequently in the pits and also began a slow fade for the 2nd of the Yost automobiles. They would come back later in the race, but at one point they were some 4 to 5 laps behind the front-running Nissans, and this is the first of those long pit stops that got them into trouble. The Nissans came on strong in formation to attack the leader, Schneider, whose brakes had been used up prematurely, and David, I think the pace just got to him. He went out too fast early.
Well, I think he did a little bit. They had a problem with the front brakes, and they wore the pads out quicker than they thought, and they got them stuck trying to get them out. It's one of those typical deals.
Here's the first yellow. You've seen this. This was the Acura story. This is the beginning of the transmission episode, and it's relevant here because it brought out the first yellow flag of the day, and under that yellow, we saw Schneider coming in, and that's when he surrendered the lead to the Nissans, and this again was the first of a series of pit stops, but it was definitely not the last that we would see of Schneider. Watch him here, David, as he comes down the inside of the racetrack.
There's the two Nissans in the lead. Schneider's lurking in the pack. Watch him just pop out to the right there. There you see him going past about 4 cars as he goes into turn 1. Nails 3 going in, and Nails 2 coming out. Going around the outside of those guys on that right-hander. All a bit hairy, brakes hard, coming to the complex 3, 4, and 5. And just in front, you'll see the Nissan going out of sight, on which young Schneider's got his eyes firmly set. Right behind the 83 car, coming down that long back straight, about 175, 180 miles an hour. Tries to go in on turn 17, coming up to the pit straight, decides to give it second thoughts. Follows it close. Look how tight he keeps the line there, a bit like Dale Earnhardt, yeah, sticking right to the bottom of the banking there. He takes a very tight line, and you just watch him nail that number 83 car as they go into turn 1. The 83 takes a conventional line. Schneider takes a very, very tight line and pulls out a tremendous amount of space, gets trapped behind that little BMW Camel Light car.
Lone Jaguar here trying to play catch up a little bit, or trying to from 4th. Schneider pitted. This time the problem was a broken shift linkage. It was unrelated to the brakes. This was just a mechanical failure. Part snapped in there, and that dropped the car some 3 laps down. It left the Toyota team to battle at that point for 3rd and 4th. And here we see the 99 car making the pass on car number 98. And at the time, if memory serves, the pilot there was Juan Fangio II. Great name in the world motorsports. He is, of course, the nephew of Juan Manuel Fangio. Rocky Moran, the pilot of the other car. Here is the continuing battle with the Nissans. The 83 car at that point driven by Julian Bailey, passing the 6 car, the Porsche, who is at that point several laps down. The 98 Toyota didn't have a very long day, unfortunately. It stopped prematurely, left the 99 car all alone. A 1-car team like the Jag, but nonetheless running strong in 3rd place, and carrying the hopes of Dan Gurney, who was one of the great driving competitors here and is now a car-owning competitor. More problems for the Jag. The left rear tire is flat. The bodywork is gone. Where is the bodywork? Well, it was left over beside the road when the tire went flat and apparently tore things loose in there. This was the coup de grace for Jones' hopes for a victory. And now a good close look at a 12-hour pit stop. This is Jeff Brabham surrendering the car to his brother Gary while the team do their work. Take a look and give a listen. Quick check the brake pads there. Determined it all as well, and on goes the wheel. Down at the back.
Safety pin. That's the big safety pin there to stop those wheel nuts coming undone.
Watch what happens here as you see that. Jeff has gotten out of the car. Gary is in. Door slams, ready to go. And in his very first drive in a GTP car, Gary kills it better than a doornail when they drop the car down off the job.
Embarrassment, a little red face in there, but he took the car over in the lead and never did lose the lead during the stint.
I had a little misfire after the long yellow. Otherwise, we're in good shape.
That was Derek Daly describing the fact that they are in good shape. But look here. Here is Jeff Brabham at the end of that long spin to which we alluded earlier. Now, they have since swapped drivers twice. The reins have come back, and Jeff just went straight off there at something like 160 miles an hour. Had to find his way back onto the racetrack. Now, keep in mind that this is the car that ultimately won the race, but this was his moment of certainly not glory here as he came wandering back through the race.
Again, demonstrates that in these races you do need just that little bit of luck, because that spin could so easily taken place somewhere else, like here, for instance, where there would have been something to hit.
Here's the 99 car in the pits, and this is the beginning of the Toyota team's downfall. They have a windshield wiper problem on that car. Here we see the restart with the Nissans out front. followed by the number 7 Porsche, the Daytona winner, which at this point has worked its way back up to 3rd, and then the number 99 Toyota. And by now, as you see, the headlights are on, the rain is falling, and we are getting back after a long, long series of green, but the problems continue. This is the Hotchkiss, Adams, and Cord Porsche taking a spin. This one did not bring out a yellow, but several similar incidents did. Cars stopped in dangerous places on the racetrack, and the pace car nearly ran out of gas at one juncture in this 12-hour event. As we moved into the darkness, the yellow certainly flew its share here today.
Well, the pace car wasn't expected to do 3 hours, something that would have taken 4 legs of Florida.
So the Nissan seemingly in control of this race, but too early at this stage to write off the Daytona winners, the Porsche 962. Bob Wallach still in tremendous form, and Henri Pescarolo, after his accident last year, too looking as though he was quite determined to turn in a good result. And also, Andrew, shouldn't write off the Jaguar at any stage.
No, although the car had quite a big problem with a misfire, which the team couldn't improve at all, the car actually dropped back to 15th place, then started to climb up the field. Well, we'll be back with more in just a moment. Stay tuned on Screensport. Back at Sebring with the 83 and 84 Nissans trading the lead. The two cars prepared by the American, Californian, in fact, Nissan Performance Technology Group. Used to be known as Electromotive, the organisation run by Don Devendorf and Kaz Kasner. They've won 27 of the last 44 IMSA races. This car bears absolutely no relationship at all, and there you see a little problem in the pits. The car bears no relationship at all to the World Championship Nissans that raced last year. It's got a V6 engine rather than the V8, and has been developed entirely in the United States. Runs a, should we say, old-fashioned aluminium honeycomb monocoque rather than the carbon fibre that we have on the English cars. But let's just catch up with this piece of news.
They've certainly changed drastically in the last few minutes. First, Irish eyes are smiling right now because you said your parents were watching live in Ireland for St. Paddy's Day.
Yes, we had a good St. Paddy's Day the last time, so happy St. Patrick's Day again. Everything is going well here.
We don't know what has happened to your other Nissan, Chip Robinson, stalled at the racetrack right now, but let's go back about 30 minutes or so. You were in the car, you had a problem on the racetrack, and almost cost you the victory.
Really did. We just before the full course yellow about an hour ago, started jumping out of 2nd and 3rd gear, and I began to hold it in, and periodically, maybe 3 or 4 times a lap, it would jump out. I was going through turn 3, I popped out of 2nd gear, I immediately drifted onto the wet patch, spun, and broke the rear wing. So I actually handed the car back to Jeff, 1 lap down, so Mickey, can you imagine how things change?
But when you came in, turned the car over, you also changed the full rain tires. We have documented throughout the day that we've had 3 different types of tires, the rain, the intermediate rain, and also the slick. You changed back, then Chip came in and changed the full rain tires.
Right, we monitored each other's cars. Our decision to go in intermediates about an hour ago was made really because Jaguar went on them and they suddenly went 5 seconds a lap quicker. So we immediately jumped on intermediates and both cars were a lap ahead of the field. Then I had my incident. Now it looks like Chip Robinson's had a major incident, which has stopped him and given us the lead back again. So, I mean, that's the look of the Irish right now.
We've had rain, sometimes heavy, off and on all day. In fact, in the past probably 20 minutes, it's coming down good right now.
Yeah, this is the worst conditions that I think Sebring's had for many, many years. It's not often you go through most of a 12-hour race with rain or threatening rain. I mean, we've hardly used slick tires.
Derek, from the cockpit, you guys can handle the wet. That's not the problem. The problem is visibility.
Well, that's right. Our wiper motor broke about 6 hours into the race. So we were using all sorts of materials on the window trying to get it to stay clear. And it was a major problem, particularly in traffic, because the spray is so bad. I mean, you just have to hope you can follow it.
83, the leader again then. That's the Daly Brabham car. The incident that Derek Daly got concerned with, he's breathing a little easier now, obviously, but he had 2 big spins when he was caught out there in the rain and a collision with the wall. That was when they brought his car in. Straight after that, after 84 had assumed the lead ahead of 83. Here's a shot of the pit stop where the Daly Brabham car received the attention after those two big spins by Daly. See frantic activity down there to try and get the car back straight again, but no sooner had they got this one out and operating properly than 84 came in. Bob Earl bringing it in with an electrical problem. That was when it was pushed down the length of the pit road, and 83 took over the lead. 84 managed to get out again in second place, but all this time, Andrew, it was number 6 Bob Wallach turning the screw and closing on the Nissans all the time. You can see how desperate they were down in pit row. Everything coming off the back of the car, attention to every single detail, just to try and defend the title that they won so convincingly last year.
Yes, certainly. They really made their hearts thump, I should think, right at the end of the race, having led it so well, and to have all those problems and aggravation and spins and so on. Very depressing for them, but suddenly they got a smile on their face. Both cars out of the pits and running again, and still at the head of the field with the Jeff Brabham, Gary Brabham, Derek Daly car, just about a lap ahead of the Robinson, Earl and Bailey car. As you said, a lot of pressure still from Wallach, Schneider and Segala, with the second Yost Porsche in 4th spot.
Now here's a problem for the GTO, who was leading the GTO class at one stage, dropped down to 4th, this Whistler Mustang. Electrical fault right the way through the night time, through the dark hours, and that of course had fogged up his windscreen completely. This is the Dorsey Schrader car, fogged up his windscreen completely, and at night with it raining, a fogged up windscreen. We saw him earlier on in Screensport's transmission when he had the old scraper running up and down the windscreen to try and keep it clear, but that was a continual problem, and I should think driving in those sort of conditions, well, talking about hearts thumping in pit road, what about inside the cockpit?
Absolutely. Factory back Ford, prepared by Jack Roush Racing. Two of these Whistler Mustangs. In some ways quite similar to NASCAR, similar sort of chassis. There's the top 5.
It's Segala currently driving the Bob Wallach Porsche. Davy Jones at the wheel of Jaguar number 3 and holding down 6th place. They dropped down to 15th at one stage, so that represents an achievement to get up to there with 5 laps to go. The wind getting up, the rain starting to beat down again. See the flags flapping around in a fairly stiff breeze coming across from the Tampa area across central Florida, going down to disrupt the Gulf in Orlando too, not just the 12 hours of Sebring.
Just to remind you, of course, that the second Jaguar, what's that all about, Andy?
Well, 80,000 spectators, and they decided they got a bit bored with the race, and so they've set fire to a few bits of litter and everything else. Quite a normal occurrence at Sebring. I think the spectators there are renowned for unusual off-track activities. In fact, they're not unusual off-track activities. It's just they're not normally done in public.
It's quite a good barbecue going there. I was just going to say the other Jaguar, of course, was crashed on the first day of practice by Davy Jones, totally destroyed as he avoided a spinning GTU car. And so the second major endurance race, Jaguar down to 1 car. It surprises me that the Walkinshaw organisation doesn't bring a spare car to these races.
Yes, I mean, you thought they'd have learned by experience now, but obviously Davy Jones with that great win at West Palm Beach last time out, and hoping to pick up some useful points on this occasion as well. Kenny Atchison sharing the driving in that car at this stage. Well, down there in the pits, it's a chance to see what's going on, particularly with that Dorsey Schrader car, that Whistler Mustang that we saw, because that obviously having electrical problems. Wonder how they're overcoming that.
Guys, the problem with Dorsey Schrader is one that we experienced back at the 6-hour mark. Fog inside the number 12 Ford Mustang. He literally could not see. Can you imagine how frightening a feeling it must be going around this track at speed, in the rain, in the dark, and you can't see at all?
Yeah, I can. It was exactly what we were talking about. What we also want to know is what's going on in Camel Lights, because that's an important category. Here you see Jay Hill's Buick Spice, which has spent a long time there in the pits. It was leading the category at one stage, but now it's dropped back to second place in the classification.
Yes, of course, that Acura-powered or Honda-powered Spice already dropped out. And news coming this week, Andy, that the Spice organisation has been saved, and they will definitely be continuing to build these race cars and service them.
Good news indeed. Let's move up the pit lane because we must find out what's happening with the race leaders. 83 gone into the lead, ahead of 84 now, and of course one of the 84 drivers, that great veteran Bob Earl.
I've certainly seen the emotional aspect of racing being played out here first, with Derek Daly thinking he'd made a mistake, gone off track, and perhaps given the victory to the team Nissan. We saw the exuberation from Bob Earl when his car was out in front. Now I think you're back to second with the ignition problem, so obviously ecstasy and agony up and down the past 30 minutes.
Yeah, about 20 minutes ago, we were about to win the champagne, and then all of a sudden, portions of racing hit us, and the ignition box got wet, and the car stopped in pit entrance. They had to push it all the way down here, and got it fixed. Luckily, it stopped here, so we'll still take second place, hopefully, but, you know, you never want to count your chickens.
But in the cockpit, as the driver, you have some degree of control of what's going on. But here as the co-driver in the pit area, all you can do is what?
No, I can't do anything, but I'm kind of glad I'm not in the car because I would have been really frustrated. You know, the cars are prepared top-notch for stuff like this. When the water is in the car about 6 inches deep, there's not much you can do when it gets into all the electronics.
I know with Nissan it's a good team effort, though, and there will be some jubilation whether you're 1 or 2.
Well, one thing they got to remember is we're racing with each other.
Bob Earl down there in the pits with Marty Reed. So 83 clinging on to the lead. That's the Brabham car. Jeff, having experienced, unusually for him, a 5-race losing streak. And obviously this season didn't win at Daytona or at West Palm Beach. 2 laps to go, and it's Nissan number 83 leading from Nissan 84, running again after that brief stop to put electrical problems right.
Yes, that's right. I think 2 seasons ago when Jeff ran to the IMSA Championship, he had 8 victories in a row, so he knows what it's like to win in a row, and now he's found out what it's like to lose. Also, his younger brother, 29-year-old Gary, doing a good job there. Very little experience in these sort of cars. He drove a Group C Porsche at Le Mans a couple of years ago, and that's about the sum total of his experience in these big sports cars. The man who tried to get into Grand Prix racing last year, of course, in the Life team. That was, I think you could only call it a dead loss.
Good to see Gary back. Saw him at Daytona. He's walking up and down the pit road there, totally disconsolate. He hadn't got a chance of any drives. He was running out of money. He's decided to make his future in the States, and hopefully Nissan will give him a few more rides throughout the season. More problems for the Whistler.
Yes, Gary has actually also raced with his brother David. He did that down at the first race at the new Eastern Creek facility down in Sydney the end of last year. Drove to second place, I think it was, in a Benson and Hedges Sierra Cosworth. Good drive that with brother David. Now racing with the older brother Jeff.
Whistler Mustang on its way out of the pits. Dorsey Schrader still driving that. They've got to keep coming in to have the windscreen demisted. Heading towards the checkered flag. We've had 8 yellows in all throughout the 12 hours, including 1 long 90-minute stretch. In fact, we've had 3 hours in total under caution. A quarter of the race has been run under the full yellow, and with a pace car obviously at the head of the field.
Yeah, last-minute flurry of activity for 5th place with John Nielsen, Davy Jones, Raoul Boesel up to 5th spot in their Jaguar.
On to the final lap. Nissan still running 1 and 2. 83, the IMSA champion Jeff Brabham leading the way, with Derek Daly on St Patrick's Eve, looking as though he's going to defend his Sebring title in real style.
Well, he's not had a lucky career, has he, over the years, Derek Daly? He's had all sorts of setback. That terrible accident at Indianapolis with an Indy car which kept him out of racing for over a year. Of course, he did race for the Williams Grand Prix team for a while. I think 5th place was the best he garnered from that particular part of his career, but Andy.
Until last year, he hadn't actually won, but until he actually won at Sebring, he hadn't won a race since 1979 in British Formula 3.
Amazing.
Here we come, coming up to the checkered flag. See the flags being unfurled up there on the podium, waiting for them to come round again. The next time that they're round, the checkered flag will be shown. Nissan repeat last year's 1-2, although perhaps not quite as tension-filled as it was last year when Jeff Brabham had to make up ground on Jan Lammers in the Jaguar over the last couple of laps to claim second place, and that pulling to a halt at the, that's actually on the track inside, not in the pit lane, that's actually on the track. There's the pit lane, the other side of the wall there, pulling to a halt just short of the line is 33, one of the Camel Lights, which is the Buick Spice, and they were well up in their category. They were running second at one stage. Parker Johnston, in fact, it is. Parker Johnston, who was leading that category at one stage very early in the race, but has now pulled to a halt, and hopefully he's going to make it and still be running at the finish. He's actually left it a few yards short of the start-finish line. He obviously daren't go any further, because otherwise he'd have to complete another whole lap.
Yes, we've seen that sort of thing happening on a number of occasions, and lights flashing, and the excitement of victory there.
That's the Nissan number 83. Jeff Brabham driving the final moments of the race winner.
Still appalling conditions out there, just horrible to drive in. And the flag goes, and Nissan score a 1-2 victory in the Sebring 12 Hours.
Great win for Jeff Brabham. The two Brabhams and Derek Daly in the lead car, Bob Earl, Chip Robinson and Julian Bailey in the second Nissan. Good result for Julian after the disappointment of Phoenix.
Yeah, in fact, I spoke to Julian after his disappointing failure to qualify in the Lotus. He really was depressed, so let's hope this cheers him up. Apparently in the Lotus he had lots of misfire problems in qualifying. Let's hope in Brazil in a week's time they manage to get the car going better.
So Nissan 1-2, we'll check the overall positions in the next part, and also be talking to the men who went through the grueling 12 Hours of Sebring 1991. $1,000, so a pretty good 12 hours work so far, and the congratulations for Jeff Brabham being led by Miss Monica Hilton, who's always up there on the podium, Miss Camel GT. Let's find out what the winning crew think about their achievement today.
Jeff Brabham, congratulations on what is one of the most rain-soaked but exciting finishes that we've seen, and we just lost all our lights. I hope everybody can see you.
Well, it was a hell of a day. I mean, it was very tricky out there, and you know, the Nissan ran great. The only problem it did was the windscreen wiper didn't work, and you know, that was a bit of really hard at the end of the race. I really couldn't see anything, but Gary did a great job, Derek did a great job, and the guys were fantastic.
Hey, Derek Daly, tis the luck of the Irish. I mean, St. Paddy's Day 2 times in a row?
I'll take it any way it comes. I mean, what a roller coaster racing can be, but today was a typical example of how you can be up, think you're looking real good, be down, and then suddenly back up again. Everybody did a great job with this team now. It's the best.
Gary, I remember talking to you the first time you got in the car, and all of a sudden the clouds just opened up, and talk about pressure, the car was in the lead at the time.
Yes, it was a good initiation for me, but the car went very well and it was no problem to drive, so I went out in the lead and came back in the lead, so I hope I did my bit.
Well, you can see it's a happy bunch down here, the number 83 Nissan team.
Well, they certainly are a happy bunch, the two Brabham boys, and the older one, Jeff, starting to look more and more like his father, Sir Jack, I think. With me, Andy Smith, our American commentator.